This lecture of mobile computing covers another aspect of mobile computing, that is the context-aware computing. We will discuss in details about the context-aware awareness and the context-aware computing in this lecture further. What is context? The context is the physical and social situation in which a person or device is a part of. For example, the time of the day, location, other people or devices nearby, temperature, sound, light, motion, network or internet, all of these are the context for a particular person or the device. These all try to sum up the physical and social situation in which the person is present or the device is present. Based on this context, we need to define the context-aware computing, how it is possible. In the context-aware computing, it acquires and utilizes the context from a computer device in order to provide services that are appropriate given the acquired context. For example, if we map the time of the day, location, and the surrounding temperature and the motion around, we can detect the traffic situation around at a particular time of the day in a particular location. So with the help of the context, many situations can be analyzed. These are not similar to the activity sensing, because in that only a single activity is being sensed. But here, because of the context, what are the inferences we can derive, that is made possible in context-aware computing. So here you can see as an example in the context awareness, these are shown as the context which are possible as the location, time, etc. Implicit, these are the input and output of the system, and they are seamlessly integrated with each other or might be dependent or impacting to each other. For example, the location of an individual might be impacted by the time of the day. Next, we will see the context awareness. How can it be possible? Here is a diagram in which there is a ubiquitous network in which we have the nature or the surrounding, the city area where the buses, road networks, the buildings are there, and the home where the people are residing. So with the help of all the contextual sensing the environment automatically, and also the historical data of an individual, with the help of that, they try to adapt to the changing situation and learn the context awareness behind the complete network and predict certain activities which is possible in the particular network. From this context awareness, we can fetch the location information, enhance the sensor technology, gather the context inference, and also develop an application framework for the use case. Now, next topic in the context awareness is the context categorization. As we have discussed various examples of the context, this context is further categorized into two factors. One is the human factor and another one is the physical factors. The human context or human factor includes the information on the user. Example, the habits, emotion state, biophysiological activities of an individual. The user, so it also captures the information regarding the user's social environment. Example, the co-location of other users nearby to that particular individual, the social interaction of the user, the group dynamics of the user, whether that person is friendly, whether the user has a lot of connections, or that person is introvert with a few number of connections. Another major human factor is the computed is the user's task, like what activities the user is performing. So basically, the activity recognition is a part of context awareness. In this, the current activity of the user, the tasks in which he is engaged, and what is the general goal of that user is identified. Next is the physical context. In this, there are two types of context. One is the active context and another one is the passive context. In case of active context, it influences the behavior of the application, as when we try to capture the context, that will affect the behavior of the application, how the application behaves. But in case of the passive context, the context is relevant, but it is not critical or influence the behavior of the application. For example, if we map the location, that will be dependent, that application will be location dependent and will be changing with the changing location. For example, different kind of behavior will be possible in case of a hilly terrain, whereas a different kind of behavior is observed in a congested road scenario. So now we will talk about the requirements which are needed for the context-aware computing, because context-aware computing is not able to be possibly done standalone. We have the further few requirements. The first basic requirement is of the smartphone, which have great computational power, because identifying the context from the sensor of the smartphone and making the computation itself in the smartphone is a basic requirement which needs higher power, a higher computation power, and also the energy loss should be very low. The next requirement of the context-aware computing is the high-speed internet and wireless access. With the possible internet speed and the wireless access, the context mapping can be done easily. And because the context needs to be mapped for a longer duration of time to make an analysis, we need to have a constant internet speed and a wireless action. Let us discuss further the characteristics of the context. First, context information exhibits a range of temporal characteristics, as in, with the time, the context of the individual gets changes. So it exhibits a range of temporal characteristics. It varies with the time. The context information is very imperfect. It is not similar or exact the same for all the users, or even for an individual user, the context information keep on varying. So it is imperfect. Another characteristic of context is that the context has many alternative representation. At one moment of time, based on the application, the context may be comprising of the temperature and the surrounding light. But in the other moment of the time, the context may be dependent on the location of the user. So that representations may vary and may alternate. Another characteristic of context information is that it is highly interrelated. That is, the context information may be causally dependent upon each other. So we need to map the context among itself also for the context-aware computing. There are, apart from all the advantages and characteristics of the context-aware computing, there are few issues and challenges that need to be looked into while proceeding for the context-aware computing. The first one is that how to represent the context information, because there is no fixed format or there is no fixed information in terms of context. It may vary. So we need to need to look into how to represent that context information. For example, we need to have a proper data structure and algorithms developed for the representation of the context information. Another issue or challenge is how frequently does the system need to be updated on the context changes. As we have discussed earlier also, that the context is not perfect, is imperfect, and also it is temporal. It has temporal characteristics and varies with time. So if we need to look into for each application that how frequently does the system needs to be updated for the particular context. Next is how often to poll. For example, if we update the context at each second of time or at each millisecond of time, then the power consumption will be very high and the data collected will be very large, thereby leading to higher power consumption. So we need to also map how often we need to poll. And also another challenge is of how often to change the behavior. As we have mentioned, the behavior, context behavior changes with the application. So we need to check how often we need to change the behavior. Next challenge is that what sensor infrastructure or sensors are necessary for the required context. We also this is the most challenging thing when we are describing the context awareness, because each of the context may require a different set of sensors or different set of architectures and infrastructure. So for that purpose, we need to decide and look into depth for each of the context and what are the relevant sensors which are required for that. There may be a situation of fallback in which the sensors data which is captured and the context which is required may not provide the relevant information and lead to the proper context aware computing. So at that condition, we need to have a separate setback conditions or setback context which may be relevant to that condition. Next issue is to how to sense the local information, like what device should be developed or what system should be developed to sense the context or the context changes. So these are the major issues that we need to further first address whenever we are trying to capture the context information or whenever we are trying to predict the context aware computing. This is how we can judge about the discuss or represent the context aware computing in case of the mobile computing, and it is a very helpful method in nowadays. So that is all for the today's lecture. Thank you.